It is my esteemed pleasure to welcome to the stage our political leader. Us, the young people, we call her Auntie Mia. Our political leader and your Prime Minister, Mia Amor Mottley.
Good night. Good night to the people of Ashton Hall, in particular here in the zone. Good night to all who hear this voice. Today is 14th of May, 2025. And I ask you to reflect on the fact that today is a significant day in the history of this country. For some 400 years ago, the British first landed on this island, not far from here really. And we must, as a people, reflect and commemorate, recognizing that those who do not know their history are at risk of repeating the worst aspects of it and becoming victims of it again. And earlier today, I would have shared with the wider public of Barbados my own views about where we are and how far we have come, and how we must remain committed to continuing that journey. And if I ever had any doubt that our future may be at risk, I can wipe it out tonight. Because I stand here as a proud leader of a Barbados Labour Party that is 87 years old and that has seen from Grantley Adams to Dr. Hugh Gordon Cummins to Tom Adams to Sir Harold Bernard St. John to Sir Henry Ford to Owen Arthur to myself, and somewhere in the future, you might well find the next leader having spoken to you in Ashton Hall tonight. And I say this conscious that our development is a relay process and that we have come to be able to move forward. Just as Tom and Bree and Sir Henry, and it is highly unusual that three men of the same generation would ever have the opportunity to lead a party. And that is why what is happening in the Democratic Labour Party now is so unseemly. Because in this Labour Party, we saw three men of the same generation come to leadership, once known, for those of you who are young, in 1976, they called them the Great Combination. And as fate would have it, the vicissitudes of politics saw to it that each would get their chance to lead. And in Henry Ford, We had a man who was strong enough, but discerning enough to realize that in 1991, when he lost, that it might not have been his again to ever be able to lead a Labour Party into victory. And in 1993, Sir Henry did the decent and courageous thing and recognized that the country had moved on and that the energy of the moment needed younger people. By that stage, he had already assembled a number of us. In 1991, for the first time, I ran. Liz Thompson ran. Ronald Toppin ran. Joe Edgell, Duncan Carter, Glenn Clark. And as fate would have it, 4 of us came to under less than 200 votes to win in. But it was not enough to get Henry over the line. And you in St. Peter know that one vote is enough to keep you out. If it's one constituency that know that, or one parish I should say, because we are in the parish of St. Peter, but the constituency of St. James North. But the point I'm making is that this Barbados Labour Party understands the importance of refreshing and continuing to build a team that can accept that the task and the mission which we have is a relay mission. And that is why I would have to be kicking down the very ladder that I stood up on when I joined this party. And when at the tender age of 23, I became a candidate in St. Michael Northeast. And when at the tender age of 25, I became a senator, having lost that seat in January 1991. And when at the age, not of 29, but 28, then I joined the House of Assembly and the Cabinet as Minister of Education, Youth and Culture. I well remember when Owen Arthur appointed Liz Thompson as Minister of Health, Ronald Toppin as a minister in the Ministry of Tourism, and myself as Minister of Education, Youth and Culture. Reginald Farley, who was not much older, was brought in also as Minister of Commerce. And in fact, I recall at the time, our great friend, the political scientist George Bell, reflected on the fact that Liz and I may have been a little too green for education and health. Well, time told the story about that. And clearly, like with good rain that came in on the 6th of September 1994, that is why, Chad, I don't mind when the rain falls, as Sylvie, who live round the corner, tell me, and you all know Sylvie. Sylvie tell me whenever the Labour Party win in, the rain is fall. And that has been my experience. But we ripened quickly and became equal to the task of leading those complex ministries. So when tonight I came early, most of you know that normally when a public meeting is on, I come just before I'm required to speak. I made it my business to come into the zone tonight, just after 7, and to listen. Anybody who tried to talk to me tonight, I told them what? I am listening. I can talk to you after. Because my gut told me that this was the move that we needed to make as a party. And these young people who mounted this platform tonight validated that instinct. And I want to thank all of them. All. Because you heard, and I've been watching the comments online too, where people have expressed their satisfaction that this party doesn't only have a test team, it don't only have a one-day team, it don't only have a T20 team, it got right down the level, intermediate, all the kind of divisions you will find, even a BCL team. And I am deeply disappointed because I'm a Bajan. And today I speak to you against the shadow of that 400th anniversary, which led to our being brought to and born here. So I cannot want other than the best for this country. The people in the Democratic Labour Party are not our enemies. They may be opponents in an election, but they're not our enemies. And I could easily reduce myself to the type of rhetoric as a leader that would cause people to believe that. But what would I be doing to you, the ordinary citizens of this country, if I was so reckless and irresponsible? And that is why, especially in a world like today, where the commodity of truth is taken lightly and disrespected. And if I have a problem with the current leadership of the Democratic Labour Party, it is laziness. It is failing either by accident or deliberately to locate themselves in the realm of truth and facts when they are blatantly showing in their face. Now, how many roads do you think a government can do in a whole year? Barbados, because of our history with the plantocracy, actually has more paved roads per capita than most countries in the world. That is a fact. And it is largely because when the British came in the 17th century, they chose to settle here. And unlike the other islands, where they only sent in overseers to be in charge, many of the British plantation owners chose to live in Barbados. That is why those people who owned Colleton in the 17th century, take a piece of history, was given the responsibility and access to the lands in the Carolinas, laying the foundation for the relationship between Spikestown and the Carolinas. Over 350 years ago. And they were given that because many of the British plantocracy found it found it possible to enjoy life. And we know the sordid history of slavery and all of the other things. But because they were living here, it meant that they invested in more primary schools than they invested in the Eastern Caribbean countries and in Trinidad and Jamaica. It meant that they invested in more roads. It meant that Barbados had a police force from 1838. That is the third oldest in the entire Commonwealth. It meant that we had a post office in the 1850s and a psychiatric hospital in the 1870s when most other countries in the Caribbean couldn't even get a proper hospital. It wasn't that it was being done for us alone, don't get tired, but because they lived on an island, they needed to make sure that they had access to certain services. So we have inherited 2,500 kilometers of road. Now, when the last government did not do roads at all, because they did not have more money in the kitty beyond what was necessary to pay debt and to pay salaries, it meant that if you were doing 30, 40 roads a year, Multiply that by about 7 or 8. I ain't giving them the full 10 years because it did something in the first 2 or 3. You start with a deficit of over 300 roads when we came in. And in spite of being in an IMF program, we have found it possible to be able to do over 16 roads in this constituency of St. James North. Now you multiply that by 30. And then deal with the highways, which really have no ownership in any constituency because the highways are the arteries of the country. But when you have a Democratic Labour Party that can come and make assertions wildly, recklessly, at a time when they know that all who have come to public office must put a premium on truth, then we have a problem with it. And that is why on this platform tonight, I say to you that these youngsters who spoke gave me pride because they anchored themselves. And even when they started to go into a bit of political banter, it did not reach the depths of some of the nonsense and the vitriol that has come out of the Democratic Labour Party, particularly in the last 20 years. I know, because I have been the victim more than anybody else in this country of that vitriol. And I have said to those who want to serve in this party, play the ball, not the man. In football, when you play the man, you get called what? For a foul. Well, we can get a red card too. But when I heard Kiara and Caleb and Terrell and Tara and Roshana and Shane and Shakem, when I heard them speak on this platform, Shanika and the young socialist, don't get tied up. Shanika and the young socialist. Shanika is an established voice in the Barbados Labour Party. I called Caleb already. And I want to salute you, Caleb, because I know you came back to Barbados today having represented this country at the United Nations on small island developing states and developing issues in the last few days. So we ain't only commanding the local stage. And then you put the chairmanship of Shamar and Katasha. And what do you get? You gave the people of the zone, the people of Ashton Hall, and the people of Barbados hope that with continued mentorship, because let me tell you too, representing people is not only about talk. So don't believe that you can talk good and that is the limit of what is required of you to represent people. And that is why I have no difficulty in promoting and recommending Chad Blackman. Because talk must be anchored by dependability. Talk must be anchored by compassion and caring. Talk must be anchored by action. Talk must be anchored by discretion. Talk must be anchored by confidentiality. And in this young man, I have found him to be equal to the task, such that he is equal to anything else and anybody else that is already in the cabinet of Barbados, as I have seen from his performance in the last year as a member of my cabinet. To believe that the Democratic Labour Party is so desperate for issues that they would want the public of Barbados to believe that there is no Minister of Education. When in truth and in fact, I even said it publicly. The fact that the media didn't carry it, or the fact that they are so incapable of understanding the constitutional structure of this country, is unfortunate. But from the time before Chad Blackman resigned, I indicated that Sandra Husbands would be holding the portfolio for 2 weeks, I hope. And that thereafter, I would have the joy and honor. You know, to say if it was good once, imagine what it is twice. I will have the chance of appointing Chad for a second time as Minister of Educational Transformation. But what could inspire you to be clamoring at the bottom? You think that we don't have people who come and show me memes and things that them want to put out, and what do? I shut them down. You think anybody could come to me with a picture of Shrek? No. And I say to you that, look, I am not incapable of understanding the need for political banter, because that's what draws excitement and attention. But there got to be some limits. There got to be some limits. And I ask you tonight to recognize that this campaign fundamentally is about moving forward. Edmund Hinkson served with distinction for 3 terms. But he has determined that his time has come to an end. And the baton in the Barbados Labour Party for St. James North is being passed to Chad Blackman. And if I think of this country's development over the last 400 years, it is clear that having been the victim of the worst atrocities known to human civilization, belonging to a parliament that in 1661 said that we were not even human, and that legislation passed by the Barbados Parliament came to be passed across the Americas, the very same United States of America and the 13 colonies. Many of them took that slave code, some entirely without changing a comma and a full stop, and some used it as the foundation for their laws in terms of how they would come to treat black people and slaves. And in their case, their slavery went on for almost 30 years more than in the British colonies. And we in Barbados, regrettably, will forever carry the indignity that those who belong to a Parliament of Barbados made it their business to perpetrate one of the worst atrocities and to clothe it in the image of the law and to make it legal. And that is why we don't only talk about what is legal, but what is morally correct. For 7 years, I have been talking and calling the need for global moral strategic leadership. And Ralph Thorne cannot lecture me on morality. And I tell you that I guard my tongue carefully, because there are things that I could say that I don't say. And I do it because I feel I have to lead by example in this country. Oh, whatever came out of the red bag was facts. Facts. And whenever I speak to you on certain things, it is facts. And that is why I say that this country must allow us all individually to defend truth. When you see fake news come out, I tell the others, call it out for what it is. Because even in today's front page, what is the private sector warning you about? Scams, fraudulent behavior. And we have come too far. I want to salute Irvin Burgee because the words that he chose along with the writer of the anthem, Grantley Prescott, proved to be prophetic. Firm craftsmen of our fate. And that is what Grantley Adams fought for. On the 6th of June, next month, will represent 75 years that the Universal Adult Suffrage Bill passed the House of Assembly. After the 6th of June, of course, it went to the Senate and then had to be proclaimed. But Grantley Adams saw to it that your grandparents here in Ashton Hall and in the zone, along with the other members of this country, could have the right to go and vote without having to be told that you need to own land and property. How you going to own land and property if up to a few years before people had you as slaves or serfs? And Grantley said no. And that is why I want to speak to our young people. Because in other parts of the world, people are still losing their lives for the right to be firm craftsmen of their faith. People are denied the opportunity from the extremes in certain parts of the world, like Afghanistan, where girls are denied education. Can you imagine if all of you who are women in this crowd would not be able to access education? It was bad enough, as you heard from this platform. And Terrell wrote us a letter when he finished his degree. He didn't mention it tonight. Thanking us for reintroducing free education at the University of the West Indies for his year. Because many of them would not have been able to finish were it not for that. And I go further. By being firm craftsmen of our faith, we determined that we would see everybody in a pandemic and that we would do everything in our power to make sure that none of you would be denied access to health care for lack of funds in this country. The government is not always perfect. You heard Tyra refer to that, and Tyra, thank you for being able to be strong enough to stand up for what you believe. And even on this platform, to remind us of what you criticized us for and to recognize where we were able to make ground in spite of having fallen short in the eyes of some. I say to you tonight, Ashton Hall and the zone, this Labour Party has had a vision to move you forward. Grantley Adams took you to the point where if you went on a plantation or worked for a merchant and they wouldn't give you any holiday with pay, he said, that is wrong, you must get holiday. If they tried to deduct all of your salary because you took credit from them to buy some food to feed your family, he said, no. You can only deduct X amount from a person's salary because they must be able to live from week to week. Grantley Adams said that it is no sense talking about education if you don't have the school places to be able to make sure that people can move from primary to secondary. And he took care of that for you. Tom Adams came and he made a difference to the lives of people in this parish and in this constituency by passing the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act. And today, over 40 years later, those of you entitled to buy your land can still buy it at 10 cents a square foot. I tell you, it is cheaper than buying a pair of sneakers in this country. And you have a whole house lot. And when you get that title to your name, you can go to the bank and get money to be able to build a wall house or a big bungalow because you have the property as security. And when Arthur came and he said, no, it can't only be limited to plantation tenantries. They got people who moved down in areas that were not plantation areas. But when people were trying to get freedom and move, they told other people, look, I got a piece of land down here, it's about an acre. You could put and get 2 house spots or 3 house spots on it. And this Labour Party has seen to it that the non-plantation tenants are able to buy the land at $2.50 a square foot capped in a country where land's selling on the open market at $20 and $25 a square foot. And we, in this Barbados Labour Party, today, in this government since 2018, have said that in our housing programs, that we, for low and lower middle income persons, cap the price of the land at $12 a square foot to cover the cost of the land and to cover the cost of the delivery of services. But when I came into office, the people in layers in my constituency were buying land between $20 and $25 a square foot. And in spite of inflation, land is cheaper in Barbados today for lower and lower middle income people buying from the government than it was when we came into office. My friends, we will continue to pass the relay and make a difference. There are people in this community who I am told may not have water. And in the same way, this government, as recent as my meetings last Friday at the Barbados Water Authority, reinforced that we will connect the people, as promised before, in Bell and Bellevue to the Bridgetown sewage treatment and to the people in Bailey's Alley who live right below the shadow of Golden Ridge. You could imagine that. I can't get water, running water through the tap rather. And we have said that we will find strong technological solutions. In Bailey's Alley, the Water Authority has recommended a pond because of its distance from the sewage treatment plants. They are looking at other technological and engineering solutions as we speak, because in areas such as this, you may have to apply some of those solutions to those houses that do not have access to water. And when you do the cost-benefit analysis, it may well be cheaper to give them the water with the engineering solution than to relocate them to another part where they can freely get running water. My friends, your government is at work for you each and every day. And just because we pass legislation looking at zones A, B, C, D, and E, I promised the cabinet and I promised when I took over the Water Authority that we will have to find solutions, because in this world, if we can put a man on the moon, then we can surely find a technological and an engineering solution to be able to allow people to access water without contaminating the groundwater with chemical and biological contaminants. And we are scouring and doing the cost-benefit analysis. Because the other thing that I know, even outside of this immediate area of the zone, is that across the constituency, and Eddie was a champion for it, in St. James North, that there are acres and acres and acres of land in Zone A that families cannot get to use because of the designation. I am not a scientist. I am not an engineer. But what I do know is that we will cross-examine and get to the bottom of it. And that we have asked for different solutions, and whatever those solutions are, whether those solutions relate to reverse osmosis systems, God bless Dr. Seeley, because had he lived, I'm sure that we would have finished finding the solution. Dr. Hugh Seeley. But I've asked the others to do the heavy lifting. Because whether it is a communal system that the developer of land will have to put in place, or whether it is household systems, the government will put and craft the appropriate policy and, if necessary, fiscal measures. And if you doubt what I say, the people of St. Lucie and Eastern St. Peter complain about the lack of water being clean, about the brown water. And rather than go along and listen and do nothing, in the budget, this government announced that while we seek to fix the problem with respect to the filtration systems at Allendale and the Silt, and while we seek to be able to replace the rusty mains that were put down more than 100, 120 years, 130 years ago, which with the best will take time because you have to dig up the road, take out the mains, lay down new mains, connect them, pressure test them, and reinstate the road. And we have done about half the work already. And they told me it would take 12 to 18 months to do the other half. And I've said, move to 2 and 3 shift days and try and let us get it done in 12 months by the end of March next year. But what did we say we would do in the interim? That we would cover the basic water bills for the residents of St. Lucie and the residents of Eastern St. Peter, and I believe, Colin, parts of Six Men's and 1 or 2 other areas are also affected. Is that correct? And that is what a government does when it is acting with morality. The Democratic Labour Party left the people of St. Joseph to languish for years. We came in and we fixed it and built new reservoirs. I was told within 1 year of coming to office that many of the reservoirs we had would not withstand a Category 1 or 2 hurricane, depending on which one. And across this country, from Lodge Hill to Fort George to Indian Ground, you see those new black tanks put in while we were in IMF program, not contemplated that we would have to spend that money before coming to government. Making the hard decisions because water is life. And then in the case of Castle Grant, we use a concrete tank. And for the most part, areas that have been having difficulty are getting through. Now the problem is we have aged infrastructure. And you just heard me say we have 2,500 kilometers of mains. Now I can come here and talk pretty and give you sugar water and call it fruit punch. That's a fact. But the leadership in which I hold only as a steward for a few years demands of me to keep the high standards set by Grantley Adams and Tom Adams and Breeson John and Owen Arthur as Prime Ministers and Henry Ford and Hugh Gordon Cummins as Premier and as leader, the two of them. And the fact that we do not only run sprints, but we run a marathon means that you would eventually get catch out. So why would you tell a lie, or why would you do things that you know you cannot deliver to the people? How many of you remember that in 1991 when I came to office, that the big issue was whether a manifesto was a social contract or not? You remember that phrase? And the Democratic Labour Party told you that they do not believe that the manifesto is a social contract. And God knows we've lived it. Because every promise that they made, almost, not everyone, but almost, and the big major ones, and we have paid the price for it. There are people now in this party whose father and mother were strong Democratic Labour Party supporters, were canvassers, were mainstays in the Dems. And why have they come to the Labour Party? You know why, some of them? They tell me that every time the Dems was in office, between 86 and 94, the business went down and they had to move out the business. They pick it back up under Owen. And good Lord, between 2012 and 2018, they lose it and had to lose the location again. That is gospel. But what has been your record under the Barbados Labour Party? Owen Arthur came and found, even as far back as 76 with Tom, the decade under Tom Adams will come to be regarded by historians as one of the richest decades in respect of the policies implemented, from taking school children who were being put out under 16 at 14 years old, and Louis Tell put them back in school, to the building of the polyclinics, to the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, to the establishment of the Barbados National Bank and the ICBL, to the policy that said that we will give ordinary Bajans the right to own ZR B licenses, in other words, private transport. And then they also said, we respected it until the WTO literally stopped us from doing it, that we would stop franchises of car rental firms and franchises of fast food restaurants and leave that for Bajans to be able to invest in so that they could leave something for their children, because cash is not wealth. It only becomes wealth when it moves from one generation to the next to the next. And if you want to enfranchise people, then those were the policy instruments that we would use. Under Owen, the same thing. A country that had been brought to its knees. And in fairness, it started to turn the corner, but wasn't quite there. And you lived to see under Owen Arthur the lowest unemployment rate ever in this history of this country at 6.9% in December 2007. Well, you know, I closed it already, because I had 7.1. And the race ain't done. The race ain't done. And I see the foolishness. I don't know whether Anthony Wood's head is now in the rarefied atmospheres of the clouds, that he forgot what was done and what he stood for previously. But they're going to answer him line by line, because you cannot take the facts and distort them. This government found debt between the 15.8 billion officially recorded and the 1.9 billion that we owe away from larboard to starboard. Everybody in Barbados was owed by the government of Barbados in 2018. And you couldn't get credit for nothing. And when you add 1.9 to 15.8, what you get? And we brought the debt down. All debt. What was formally owed and what was officially in the arrears. 90 days or more you owe. In most instances, years. And we brought it down to 12.3. And tonight, as we stand, it is about 14.9. 7 years later, we reduced the debt on coming in a debt restructuring. Because we understood it's easy to bring down debt overnight, but you can't get back a generation if you lose your social and your whole stability. It will take a generation. Once you start to have social implosion and families falling through the cracks. And we chose to bring down the debt and brought it down by about 5.6 billion. And it has gone back up by about 2.3, 2.4 billion in 7 years. And that is only because we had a pandemic where no tourists landed in this country for a better part of 2 years. And even in the third year, your numbers were down. Your earnings were down. And we had to stabilize from hotels to tourism workers to any self-employed person, even those that had nothing at all to do with the NIS. And we created a benefit called the Business Interruption Benefit. And you're going to ask me, why our debt gone up by the $2.3 billion? We had two $1 billion adjustments effectively. The first one in the first 18 months, and the second one between 2020 and 2022, early 23. And in spite of all of that, look at what you got for your money, because under the Democratic Labour Party, you got nothing other than wages being paid, which is a good thing in part. But you can't pay wages and don't have no action and nothing else coming with it, because you don't have the capacity to repay the debt. When we bill a new accident and emergency, when we seek, as we will now open shortly in a couple weeks' time, the new lab for the climate zone for all of the schools in this country, when we build out those things, you get capacity and you'll be able to pay back the loan over 20 years, 15 years, because the people are earning and being able to help you pay back. And that is what the conversation is missing. But there has never been a government in this country, before independence and since in the modern era, for which debt has not been a political hot issue. Never. And all the big projects, think about it. The ABC Highway was a controversy. What you would do without it now? What would you do without the ABC Highway now? The hospital, call all the things. Every major project in a small society, because people seek to appeal to the lowest emotions and to use jealousy. And all of us know deep down that while we may not be able to afford certain things individually, collectively we need polyclinics and healthcare centers and hospitals. We need schools. We need roads. We need a harbor. The Deepwater Harbor was a big mess too. And I say to you tonight that this government has its eyes firmly fixed on making sure that the people of this country in the next 100 years, that 100 years from now, when May 14th, 2125 comes, most of us here will be dead. But, no, they got some young babies in the crowd that might live, and you got a lot, 103 and 105 and 107. My primary school teacher, I think, going to be 107 years old this year. God bless her soul. Miss Carrington, Dame Avis. So I don't, and with all the precision biological health care available today, I anticipate that people will live longer. But I want to make sure that when they celebrate the 187th anniversary of this party, that it will forever have its gaze on the future. That it will forever understand that we are firm craftsmen of our faith. And that it will understand that we work hard to build a legacy of which they can be proud, but it becomes a platform for future development and prosperity with every generation. Not perfection, because perfection belongs to the divine, but doing our best and seeing people, hearing people, and feeling people, consistent with what the New Testament has taught us. And the greatest of these things, this party is serious about carrying this country forward and making your life better. And that is why its motto is a better life for our people, so that we shall never forget that we will never be satisfied with where we are, because we can always dig deeper and we can always do better, and we shall dig deeper and do better. And tonight, I ask you, the people of Ashton Hall, you, the people of the zone, those who have come in from the whim, those who have come from Whitehall, those who have come from the rest of St. James North, to recognize that God willing, or as the Muslims would say, inshallah, that at this time next Wednesday night, a new chapter will be beginning for the people of St. James North. I shall never be so arrogant as to presume, but I will always be so humble as to beg and to ask you to recognize that in Chad Blackman, your vote is going not just for a big man, not just for a good man, not just for a devoted and dependable man, but for a party that has shown that by our living, we have done credit to this nation wherever we have gone in the last 87 years. And I ask those of you who are our supporters and our members to recognize that this is not about a few in a cabinet. This is not about a prime minister alone. But it is the collective effort of all of us in fighting for truth in this country, in fighting to be able to get us to understand that when I say to parents that all of us have a responsibility, it is not to cry down people, but it is to recognize that many hands make light weight. And if you have to do your part, and the teachers do their part, and the community leaders do their part, and the government does its part, and the labor unions do their part, and the private sector does their part, then Barbados shall continue with God's will to punch above its weight. And while our history, our modern history, may have started in iniquity, may have been a result of tyrannical and oppressive behavior to our great-grandparents and our great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, that we have come by bonding together to act as one, to deliver people out of bondage literally, and to ensure that the delivery out of bondage does not stop there, but with every generation, the train shall take more and more people so that people can be the firm craftsmen of our faith, as was determined when this country first became a nation. So leave here tonight on this May 14th, 2025, resolute that you must play your part in helping to lift the heavy weight of making our country and our communities better and our families stronger. And recognize that between now and 2030, there will be a lot of 400th anniversaries for the actual settlement in this country in 2 years' time, for the establishment of Speightstown as a town, for the establishment of Bridgetown as a town. But we don't commemorate them and celebrate them only because it is the right thing to do. We use them as inspiration to recognize that we shall build forever, stronger and stronger, in unity and in strength. With God on our side, we shall move forward as a people and as a nation. Next Wednesday night, let us look back and let us start that new chapter. And I ask you, the people of Ashton Hall and the zone, and the surrounding areas, to cast your vote for Chad Blackman and for this Barbados Labour Party to help us make this place better. Do not touch the line when you put that X, and recognize that in so doing, we will be laying the next chapter for all of us. God bless you, and thank you to the young people of the Barbados Labour Party for a magnificent night and for giving us hope that the future shall continue to be bright under our stewardship. Good night, and God bless you.